Hello there and welcome to the video on inverse functions. In this video we're going to have a look at what are inverse functions and how we can calculate them for any function. So what we'd like to do before that, however, is just have a little bit of a recap on the function stuff we've already done. So what I'd like to do is pause the video and just do a little bit of a starter on these functions questions. Okay, let's now go through the answers. So f of 2, what this means is put 2 into the f function. So replace x with the letter 2, with the number 2, sorry. 3 times 2 is 6, and then add 7, and you get 13. Lovely. When it's fg of 5, you put 5 into the g function first, and then you put the answer into f afterwards. So I'll leave the f alone there, and I'll put 5 into the g function. So 5 minus, and then replace x with 5, so 5 over 2, that makes it 2.5. 5 minus 2.5, that's 2.5. With that answer, I'm going to put the answer into the f function. So 3 times 2.5 is 7.5. Add 7, that makes it 14.5. So that's the answer to part B. And then moving on to part C, 4 goes into the f function first, and then the answer to that will go into the f function again. So I'll leave the first f at the front, and the f that I'm putting it into, I'll now do that calculation. So 3 times 4 is 12, add 7 is 19. And now put 19, that answer into the f function again, because there's two f's. 19 times 3 is about 60, so it's 57. Add 7, that'll make it 64. And that's the answer to part C. Let's do a few more with these two functions. Pause the video and give these two composite functions a go. Okay, with the first question, we're going to leave the g1 alone at the start, and we're going to take the f of x function. F of x function is the 3x plus 7 function. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of this algebra here and put it into the g function where x appears. So I'm going to put this bit of algebra here where the x appears in the g function. So it's going to be 5 minus 3x plus 7 divided by 2. So there we are. I've taken the g function and I've replaced x with the algebra inside the bracket. Moving on to the question the other way round, I'm going to leave the f alone at the front, and I'm going to do the g function first, which is 5 minus x over 2. And with this piece of algebra, I'm going to put it into where x appears in the f function. So it's going to be 3 brackets 5 minus x over 2 plus 7. And with this one, it might be a nice idea to expand and simplify. So it's going to be 15 minus 3x over 2 plus 7, and then add the 15 and the 7 together, because this is positive, it's the minus 3x over 2 that's negative, so that'll be 22 minus 3x over 2. And there we are, that's the answer to part E. Let's have a go at some similar questions to the ones we've already done, but with some different functions. Pause the video and give these three a go. Okay, so for g of 8, this means put 8 into the g function, so it's going to be where x appears, I'm going to replace it with 8. So 8 plus 4 divided by 3, that makes it 12 divided by 3 equals 4. In this next question, I put 2 into the f function, and I'll put that answer into the g function afterwards, but I'll put 2 into the f function first. So 9 take away 2 times 2, which is 4. 9 minus 4 is 5. And I'll take that answer of 5 and put it into the g function now. So it's going to be 5 plus 4 is 9. 9 divided by 3 is 3. 3 is the answer to part B. And C, I'm going to put 17 into the g function first. So that's going to be 17 add 4 is 21. 21 divided by 3 is 7. Then I'll put it into the g function again, because there's two g's here. So it's going to be 7 plus 4 is 11 divided by 3. Well, you can't divide 11 by 3, so I'll just write it as 11 over 3. And let's move on to two more difficult questions with these two functions. Pause the video and have a go at D and E. Okay, so for question D, I need to find the function g f of x, so I'll leave the g1 alone and I'll put f into some brackets. That's the first function that needs doing. Then I'm going to take this algebra here and put it into where x appears in the g function. So it's going to be 9 minus 2x plus 4 over 3. And I could even simplify this. 9 add the 4 makes 13 minus 2x over 3. In part E, I need to now solve g of f of x equals 1. So I know what g of f of x is. It's this thing over here. So I can write 13 minus 2x over 3 equals 1. And then when it says solve, this means work out what x is going to be equal to. So let's rearrange this equation then. Times both sides by 3 to get rid of this divide by 3. X is in a bit of a negative situation here, so I think I'll add it to the other side. So it would be 2x plus 3. Take away the 3 onto the left-hand side and I'll get 10 equals 2x. And then divide by 2, I get x equals 5. That's a solution to this equation here. Okay, let's get started on inverse functions then. So just a reminder what a function is first. Take any number, put it into your function, and you get a number out again. An inverse function is to take the answer, put it into a different function that will do things in reverse, and then get your input out again. So what does this look like? What does this look like in terms of algebra? Take any letter or number x, put it into your function, and you get an output, and we'll call that output the letter y. What an inverse function does is it takes that output value, you put it into the inverse function, and this is what the inverse function notation looks like. If the letter for the function was f, then the notation for the inverse function is f with a power of minus 1 of x, and you get your input value. And it's really important that we remember those keywords of input and output for this video. Inverse functions take outputs and turn them into inputs. Like 7, it takes the output of 7 and turns it back into what the input was, which was 3. So it basically does your function in reverse to take an output back to an input. So some simple examples would be if your function was x plus 3, the inverse function would be x minus 3. It just takes your answer and does the opposite of what you had in the original function. So for example, if I put 5 in here, then my output would be 5 plus 3, which is 8. And then if I take 8 here, 8 minus 3 gets me back to 5. So it takes the output and turns it back into the input, just like we did with 5 and 8 here. Another simple example might be f of x equals 5x. What's the opposite of 5x? It will be divide by 5. This function here times the x value by 5, and this one here divided it by 5. Those two are opposites there. You can think of inverse functions as opposite functions. If it was f of x equals x minus 2, what's the opposite of x minus 2? X plus 2. What's the opposite of x squared? That's square root x. And for 2x minus 7, the opposite of that would be x plus 7 divided by 2. So they're kind of like opposite functions. This one from here to here are opposites. This one from here to here are opposites. So we label the inverse function with this notation here. That should be a minus 1 on there, sorry. But what would the inverse function for this thing here be? Quite difficult, this one here. Would it be answer number A? Would it be answer number B? Would it be answer C? Would it be answer D? Would it be answer E? Would it be answer F? Pause the video and have a think about what the inverse function for this thing here might be. You want to have a function that does the complete opposite. And you probably will be thinking this is a pretty difficult question. In fact, the answer is the second option here. This function here and this function here are inverse functions, one of the other. So how did I get this answer here. It's pretty difficult. In these examples before, if we go back, it's pretty obvious what the inverse function was. But in this case here, when the function is more complicated, we're going to need to think of some method to work out what the answer is to that inverse function. So let me show you, or let's just remind ourselves then, what we want and what we want to find is this thing here. We know that this thing here is what we were given. That was the square root of 2x plus 5 over 7. What we want is this function here that takes the output letter y back to the input letter x. So we want something to happen to y to give us x. So that's what we'll do then. We'll take the square root of 2x plus 5 over 7 and we'll set it equal to the output letter y. So here our function is taking x as the input and giving y as the letter that is the output. But what we want is a function that does the reverse of this. It takes y, does something to it, and gives us equals x back out again. So what we're going to do here is we're going to rearrange this equation. We want a formula that takes the output number back to the input number. So we'll rearrange this by squaring first, so that will get rid of this square root around the function, and that will open up the inside of the function here. Just a reminder for rearranging formulae, what you're effectively going to be doing here is BODMAS in reverse. So when you're analysing what operations you're going to inverse first, you need to follow BODMAS, but following BODMAS in reverse. Effectively what we have here are some brackets around the 2x plus 5 over 7. So we need to do the power, which is the square root, first. There's no subtraction unless you're inside the brackets. There's no addition unless you're inside the brackets. There's no multiplication unless you're inside the brackets. There's no division unless you're inside the brackets. The first thing we actually get to is power, or the square root, before we have to go inside the brackets. So that's why we square first. Now we've opened up the brackets, now we can have a look at what's happening next. Effectively on the top of this fraction here, we have some brackets around the 2x plus 5, so we have to go to the division that we're now going to sort out. And what's the opposite of dividing by 7? Multiplying by 7. So that'll be the next thing we do to rearrange. Now that we've opened up this bracket on the top of the fraction, I'm going to now undo the addition next, so I'll subtract 5 on both sides. And then the next thing I'll do is the only thing that is left, and undo the multiply by 2, which is to divide by 2. So this thing here is effectively the answer to my question. I take y, the output value, I square it, times it by 7, subtract 5, divide by 2, and then I get my input back again. So this is a formula that takes output values to input values, which is what inverse functions do. But just a reminder for all of our inverse functions questions, the answer had x in it. So with our answer down here, I'm just going to replace the letter y with the letter x for my final answer. So this thing here is what you would write as your final answer. So once you've rearranged to make x equals something to do with y, your final answer is going to be f minus 1 x equals, and then what you've just rearranged it into, but replace the letter y with the letter x. Alright, so let's have a go at some questions together then. So your turn, find the inverse function for this thing here. Just a reminder, you need to make y equals the formula, then rearrange it, then replace your final answer with an x in there instead. So pause the video and give this question a go. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is write y equals, and then the formula, x plus 3 divided by 5. Now what I need to do is I need to now rearrange this, and I need to rearrange it in the opposite order of BODMAS. But remember, I've got some brackets around the x plus 3 inside the square root here, so I can't undo the addition first. I need to move on and undo the division that is dividing by 5 here, because dividing by 5 is not inside this square root. So the first thing I'm going to undo here is the division by 5, so that will be to multiply by 5. So it will be 5y equals the square root of x plus 3. Now I need to get rid of this square root symbol by squaring both sides. So I'm going to take 5y and square it, equals x plus 3. I've just got rid of the square root here by squaring both sides, and this thing here will cancel out this thing here. So I've just got what's in the brackets. And then the final thing to do will be to subtract 3. So it's going to be 5y squared minus 3 equals x. So therefore my final answer is going to be f inverse x equals, I'm not going to write the letter y, I'm going to write the letter x instead. So it's going to be 5x all squared minus 3. That's the answer to this question. Okay, so your turn to have a go at another question then. Find the inverse function for this thing here. Pause the video and give this one a go. So, the first thing I need to do is set up y equals 2 brackets x minus 9. And I'm going to rearrange this by following the opposite order of BODMAS. Now the x minus 9 is in some brackets, and that will be the last thing I touch. I need to touch this multiply by 2 first. So how do I undo a multiply by 2? I divide by 2. So divide by 2 is the first thing to do. And now that I've just got what's inside the brackets, I can delete the brackets and then sort out the addition, so the subtraction next. How do I sort out a subtraction? How do I do the opposite of a subtraction? I add the thing that's subtracting, add 9. So it's y divided by 2, and then on the side, add 9 equals x. So therefore my final answer is going to be f inverse x equals x over 2 plus 9. So this function here is the exact opposite of this function here. Let's move on to the next question. Pause the video and give this one a go. Okay, so I'm going to start with y equals x divided by 5 minus 7, and I'm going to rearrange this by following the opposite order of BODMAS. So I'll sort out this subtraction first, because that's the first thing I need to sort out. How do I do the opposite of subtract 7? I'll add 7. So it's going to be y add 7 on the left equals x divided by 5. Now I move along, and now I need to sort out the division. What's the opposite of division? Multiply. So I'll multiply by 5. So it's going to be y plus 7 multiplied by 5. And I put brackets around the y plus 7 to make sure that everything here is being multiplied by 5. So our final answer is going to be f inverse x equals 5 brackets x plus 7. So this topic here is really testing your rearranging formula skills from the January to February term. So if we go at this one then, pause the video and give this question a go. So the first thing I need to do is set up y equals 13 minus x over 2. And I'm going to rearrange this in the opposite order of BODMAS. So what do I have here? Well, I have some brackets around the numerator, so I can't touch any of that yet. The first thing I need to sort out is the division. So how do I undo a divide by 2? I multiply by 2. So I'll multiply by 2 on both sides. So it'll be 2y equals 13 minus x. And now that there's nothing surrounding the brackets, I can just delete the brackets. Now in this case, x is in a bit of a negative situation, so I prefer to add x onto both sides, just to make things positive, but it will appear positively on the other side. And the final thing to do will be to undo this addition of 2y that's being attached to x. So I'm going to take away 2y from both sides, take away 2y, take away 2y, and I'm going to get x equals 13 minus 2y. So f inverse will equal 13 minus 2x, because because I always replace my final answer with an x where y is. Okay, moving on to the next question, some more practice here. Pause the video and give this question a go. So it's y equals the formula 7 minus 2x. And this 7 minus 2x is inside the square root, so I can't touch any of this before getting rid of the square root. So I'll need to square both sides. So on the left-hand side, it's going to turn into y squared, and the square root and square will cancel each other out. So I'm just left with what's inside the square root. X is in a bit of a negative situation here, so I'll probably add it to the other side to make it positive, but it will appear on the other side. So it'll be y squared plus 2x equals 7. Now what's being attached to x here? I've got a times by 2 or an add y squared, and in the reverse order of BODMAS, I need to sort out the addition first. So that means I need to take away y squared. So it's going to be 2x equals 7 minus y squared. And then the last thing to do will be to undo this multiply by 2. So that would be to divide it by 2. So 7 minus y squared over 2. So my final answer is going to be f inverse x, which is 7 minus x squared over 2. And there we are, that's the answer for this question. I've just replaced y with the letter x for my final answer. And make sure you always write out this f to the power of minus 1 bracket x bracket, because that's part of your answer. And another question for you to practice with here. Pause the video and give this one a go. Okay, so first thing to do will be to set up y equals 9 minus root x over 3. Now the first thing I'd like to do, because x is in a bit of a negative situation here, is to add all of this square root of x over 3 onto the other side. So add the square root of x over 3 onto the left-hand side. So y plus the square root of x over 3 equals 9. Now I'll subtract the 9, so the y, onto the other side. So it's going to be x over 3 square root equals 9 minus y. So I've taken away y from both sides. Then I'll get rid of the square root by squaring both sides. So from here to here I'll square both sides. So x over 3 equals, and I'll square everything that's on the right hand side. So that means I need to put brackets around it and then square it. And the final thing I'll need to do is times both sides by 3. So times by 3 times by 3. And I'll get x equals 3 brackets 9 minus y squared. So the final answer here, f inverse of x equals 3 brackets 9 minus x squared. And that's the inverse function for this function here. Okay, so now it's your turn to have a go at some questions from the worksheet in the link in the description of the video below. So come out of this video, go down, click the hyperlink where it says Worksheet Link, and then have a go at the questions on that worksheet, and then come back to this video and we'll go through the answers. Alternatively, you could just go through them one by one with me, so let's get started. Find the inverse function of this thing, please. So how do I do this? I write y equals 2x plus 6 over 5, and I now need to rearrange it to make x equals. Now the numerator has some brackets around it that mathematicians don't generally write, so when I follow the reverse order of BODMAS, I can't go inside this bracket until I've gone through everything else in reverse order. The first thing I get to going in reverse order is the divide by 5. So I'll times both sides by 5, because timesing is the opposite of dividing. So it's going to appear like 5y equals 2x plus 6. Now I can start from the back again, and now I need to undo the addition next. So it's going to be to subtract 6 from both sides, So that would be 5y minus 6 equals 2x. And then I'll start from the back again, and the next thing I hit is the multiplier by 2. So I'll do the reverse of that, which is to divide by 2. So I'm going to get 5y minus 6 divided by 2 equals x. So there we are, I've rearranged it to make x equals, but the final answer here is going to be f inverse x, please write that out, equals 5x minus 6 over 2. And there we are, that's the answer to this question. Let's move on to the next one. We've got 15 of these to go, so we'll try and speed up a little. So in this question, we're going to do y equals x squared minus 3. And following the opposite order of BODMAS, I can sort out this subtraction first. So I'll add 3 to both sides. So it's going to be y plus 3 equals x squared. Then I need to get rid of the squared symbol. And what's opposite of squaring? Square rooting. So I'll square root now both sides. On the left, it's going to be y plus 3 all square rooted. Make sure you do a big square root around the whole thing. And then on the right hand side, the square and the square root will cancel each other out. So I'm left just with x. So my answer here is going to be f inverse x equals, I'm going to replace the y letter with an x letter, x plus 3 square rooted. Moving on to question 3. Pause the video and give this one a go. I'm going to crack straight on with it. So y equals x divided by 5 minus 8. And following the opposite order of BODMAS, B-O-D-M-A-S, I'm going to have to sort out the subtraction first. So what's the opposite order? What's the opposite of subtraction? Addition. Add 8 to both sides. So it's going to be y plus 8 equals x divided by 5. Then I start from the back again and I go forward till I hit division. So I need to sort out this divide by 5. So I'll times both sides by 5. Times by 5. And I'll get 5 multiplied by y plus 8 equals x. So my answer here is going to be f inverse x equals 5. And I'm going to replace the y letter with the x letter like that. And there we are. That's the answer to this question. Moving on to the next one. Pause the video and give this one a go. So I'm going to set up y equals 3x plus 1 over 5. And on the numerator here, there are effectively some brackets around the 3x plus 1. So when I follow the opposite order of BODMAS, effectively the first thing I get to is the division, because I'm not allowed inside these brackets yet. So I'll times by 5 on both sides. So I'm going to get 5y equals 3x plus 1. Then I can restart, and the next thing I get to there is addition. So I'll take away 1 from both sides. So 5y minus 1 equals 3x. And the next thing to do, the final thing to do, will be to divide by 3 on both sides. So I get 5y minus 1 divided by 3 equals x. And there we are, that's the answer. Well, no, that's not the answer. Hold on. It's going to be f inverse x equals 5x minus 1 over 3. And there we are, that's the final answer to this question. It's the inverse function for this function here. Moving on to question 5, pause the video and give this one a go. So I'm going to set up y equals 7 minus 3x. And x here is in a bit of a negative situation, so I prefer things to be positive. Looking on the positive side of things, I'll add 3x to both sides. And I'll get y plus 3x equals 7. Now I can start to rearrange this. I'll subtract y from both sides. And I'll then divide by 3. So it's 7 minus y divided by 3. So therefore my final answer, f inverse x equals 7 minus x divided by 3. And that's the answer to this question. Moving on to question 6, we'll set up y equals 9 minus 7x divided by 4. And effectively there's a pair of brackets around the numerator, so I can't touch anything inside there yet. I'll need to times by 4 first. So I'll get 4y equals 9 minus 7x. Now the brackets are released and x is in a bit of a negative situation here. So I'll add it to the other side. So it'll be 7x add 4y equals 9. I'll subtract the 4y onto the right hand side, so it's 9 minus 4y. And then I'll divide by 7, so it's going to be 9 minus 4y divided by 7. So my final answer here, f inverse x, is going to equal 9 minus 4x divided by 7. So there we are, that's the answer to this question. Let's move on to the next question. So pause the video and give this one a go. I'm going to set up y equals x squared minus 5. And the first thing I'll do is I'll add 5 to the left hand side. And then I'll get rid of the square root, so the square, by square rooting. So it's going to be y plus 5 and then a big square root symbol around all of it. And the final answer here is going to be f inverse x equals the square root of x plus 5. And that's the answer to this question. Let's move on to question 8. Pause the video and give this one a go. So the first thing I'll do is I'll set up y equals 3x minus 1 all squared. And I'll need to get rid of this squared first. So it's going to be the square root of y equals 3x minus 1. Now that I've got rid of the brackets, I can now reload my BODMAS and start from the back. Now I need to sort out the subtraction, so I'll add 1 to both sides. So it would be square root of y, and then on the side add 1. Don't put it inside the square root, it's on the side add 1. Then we'll divide by 3, so it would be the square root of y, on the side add 1, and then divide by 3 on the total of all that, equals x. So therefore the answer to this question is f inverse x equals the square root of x, add 1, divide by 3. And that's the answer to this question. Moving on to question 9, pause the video and give this one a go. Okay, so let's set up y equals the square root of x minus 8, and we'll add 8 to both sides first. Then we'll get rid of the square root by squaring both sides, and I'll square root the whole of the left-hand side, so that all of it needs to go in brackets, and then it needs to be squared. So that equals x, so therefore the final answer to this question equals x plus 8 all squared. There we are. Let's move on to the next one. Pause the video and give this one a go. So I'm going to set up y equals 19 minus 2x all square rooted. So the first thing I need to do to get inside this bracket, to get inside this square root here, is to get rid of the square root. So I'm going to square both sides. X is in a bit of a negative situation here, so I should add it to both sides. Then I'll take away the y squared. And then I'll divide by 2, so it's going to be 19 minus y squared, all divided by 2. So the actual answer here is going to be f inverse x equals 19 minus x squared divided by 2. And that's the answer in this question. Let's move on to question 11. Pause the video and give this one a go. 5 more. So let's set up y equals 25 minus 4 root x. And x is in a bit of a negative situation here, so we should add it to the other side. So y plus 4 root x equals 25. Now we'll take away y onto the other side, so it's 25 minus y. Then we'll divide by 4, so it would be 25 minus y divided by 4. And then we'll get rid of the square root by taking the whole of the right hand side and squaring it in some big brackets. So the answer to this question is f inverse x equals 25 minus x over 4, all squared in a big bracket. Let's move on to the next question. Oh, this one is challenging here. So these are the extension questions, effectively. So I'm going to set up y equals 8 over x minus 1. And I'm going to take the whole of this denominator and multiply it on both sides. So on both sides, I'm going to multiply by x minus 1. Now what's going to happen on the left? Well, it's just going to be y times x minus 1 equals, on the right hand side, it's 8 divided by x minus 1 times x minus 1. So when you divide by x minus 1 and you times by x minus 1, those two things cancel each other out. So you're just left with 8. Now we'll divide by the y. So it'll be, so let me write that down. Divide by y next. Because we can't get into the brackets yet for the subtract, we have to sort out what's on the outside of the brackets first, which is the multiply. Opposite of multiply is divide. So it'd be 8 divided by y. And then we can sort out the subtract, so add 1 to both sides. Yeah, 8 divided by y plus 1. So the answer to this question, f inverse x equals 8 divided by x plus 1. So yeah, we're on the extension questions this time. We're dealing with some pretty difficult rearranging formulae questions. Pause the video and now give this one a go. So it's going to be y equals 4 over x minus 7. And we'll sort out the subtract first by adding it to the other side. And now we've got this divide by x. Now I'd like ideally everything to be on one horizontal row. So I'll first times by x. So it's going to be x multiplied by everything on the left hand side. And to make sure that I'm multiplying it by everything on the left hand side, I'll put everything on the left hand side in brackets and multiply it by x. But what I can do now, if I'm making x the subject, is divide by this bracket. So it's going to be 4 divided by y plus 7, because at the moment x is multiplying this thing here. If we want to undo the multiply, we divide. So the answer here is f inverse x equals 4 divided by x plus 7. Let's move on to question 14 then. Pause the video and give this one a go. So in this question, we're going to set up y equals 8 minus 2 over root x. X is in a bit of a negative situation here, so I'll add it to the other side. Now I'll take away y onto the other side. So I've just got the fraction on the left-hand side. Whoops, I've got to subtract it, haven't I? Subtract. Now the next thing to do, I want to get it on one horizontal row. So I'm going to be multiplying now by the square root of x. So it's going to be 2 multiplied by the square root of x, all of the right-hand side, which is 8 minus y. I'll now reload to the top of the right-hand side of this page, and I'll divide by what's being multiplied onto the square root of x. So 2 divided by 8 minus y equals root x. The final thing to do is to get rid of the square root, so it's going to be 2 over 8 minus y all squared equals x. So therefore the answer to this question is f inverse x equals, in brackets, 2 over, whoops, don't know what happened there, 8 minus y all squared. And there we are, that's the answer to this question. Ignore that scribble. Let's move on to the final question of this video, and this is really top level extension stuff here. Pause the video, give this one a go. I want to crack straight on. So y equals 2 over x minus 1 all square rooted. I'll have to sort out this big square root first by squaring both sides. Y squared equals 2 over x minus 1. Now I can't do anything until I've multiplied the denominator onto the left hand side, so it's going to be this denominator multiplied onto the other side. So I'm going to times by x minus 1 here onto the other side. Whoops, that's meant to be a 2 there. The next thing to do would be to divide by the y squared, so it's x minus 1 equals 2 divided by y squared. And the final thing to do would be to add 1 to get rid of the subtract 1, 2 over y squared, and on the side, add 1. So there we are, that's the answer to that final really tricky inverse function question. Thanks very much for watching this video and going through all of the questions with me. It's been really tough towards the end especially. Hopefully you've built up the strategies of rearranging formula. We've done loads of rearranging formula here, but you've also learnt how to inverse a function. You set y equal to the formula, rearrange it, and then your final answer is going to be f inverse x, and then you swap out your formula with the letter x where you have the letter y, and this will do the exact opposite of the function that you've got defined as f. Lovely, thanks very much for watching this video.